Last year, I was in a position where I had enough money in my account to pay for my bills. Now, I'm worried that my account is going to overdraft because the amount I get paid is less than how much my bills cost for that pay.
How am I working full time and still broke? Like, how am I working this much and still stressed about money? Every time I get paid, it's gone to bills. Like, I knew I couldn't keep going on this way.
If you feel like you are making more money than before but still have nothing left at the end of the month, you are not imagining it. Today, America is still the largest economy in the world. People are still going to work. Stores are still keeping their lights on. But behind that picture is a very different reality. American workers are publicly sharing their actual pay, and the numbers are frightening even while working full-time and making an average of $1,204 a week. 37% of adults still cannot come up with $400 for an emergency. Just one car repair or medical bill can be enough to push them into a cycle of debt. So where is the money really going? Why does working full-time still not leave enough to build an emergency fund? Why can even people making six figures no longer afford to get by in America? In this video, I'm going to show you why millions of American families can no longer afford to pay their bills and what that says about the modern American economy. At the same time, I will run the numbers to show you how many hours you have to work every week just to afford life in America. Watch until the end of the video and you will see how a retail job with a starting wage that seems ordinary can actually be worth more than some careers that look far more impressive online. $1,100 for 2 weeks of work. Can you believe that? Honestly, when this woman said she was a manager at McDonald's, I thought the number would be higher, and this is not a household with only one person working. According to her, her husband also used to be a manager at McDonald's and made a little more than she did. Both of them work. They both have job titles that sound fairly stable. So why do they still feel like they never have any money? Of course we have to be fair. The video does not say whether she is a shift manager or the manager of the entire restaurant. We also do not know how many hours she works, what her pay looks like before deductions, or exactly what was taken out of her paycheck, so I am not going to use one case to claim that every McDonald's manager in America gets paid this amount. That may not be true, but this case still made me stop and think, because in America, a management title used to suggest at least some level of stability. It did not necessarily mean being rich, but people still expected it to be enough to pay the bills and put something aside for the future. But what about here? She estimates that she brings home around $2,200 to $2,400 a month. Now add up the expenses she mentioned in the video with me. Rent is around $1,500. The car payment is around $500. Car insurance is close to $400. Electricity in Phoenix adds another $200. Those four expenses alone come to around $2,600 a month. And that does not even include food, gas, a phone bill, or any unexpected expenses. And I know some people will immediately look at the car payment and say, there it is. The problem is how they spend their money. That may be partly true. A $500 car payment is not small. She also admitted that some choices she made in the past caused her insurance to cost more. She is not avoiding responsibility, but would getting rid of the car really solve everything both of them still have to get to work? How would they get there? And what about the electric bill in Phoenix? In a city that hot is air conditioning really a luxury they can just cut out? This is what frustrates me about advice that says just spend less. We are very quick to find a cup of coffee, a streaming service, or one bad decision to explain why a family is struggling. Maybe doing that makes us feel safer. As long as we live the right way, this will never happen to us. But the numbers here do not let us feel that safe. According to her, after the regular bills are paid, the family only has around $300 to $400 left. That sounds like they still have money, right? But what about food? What about gas? What happens if the car breaks down? What happens if one person gets fewer hours or an unexpected medical bill shows up? The money they call leftover is really just waiting for the next bill to take it. And that is what is truly worrying. The decline of an economy does not only show up when people lose their jobs, it also shows up when people are still working, still getting promoted, and still receiving regular paychecks, but their lives keep getting more fragile. This family may not be in a crisis yet, but there is almost no space left between them and a crisis. Even so, at least the hours they work still show up on their paychecks. Not every worker in America is that lucky, because right now I'm going to show you people who start working long before their paid time even begins. I do not want to hide how I feel, but after watching those videos, I realized that being a flight attendant is not nearly as appealing as I thought. From the outside, it looks almost like a dream job. Neat uniforms, nice hotels, new cities. People see the sky, but they rarely see how the pay is calculated behind the airplane door. One flight attendant used to make around $70,000 at her previous airline. But when she moved to another airline and became a new employee, her income dropped to around $27,000 before taxes. Can you believe that she is still the same person and she still has all that experience? But switching airlines basically means going back to the starting line. Every airline has its own pay scale, and new employees usually have to start at the lowest levels. At some airlines, it can take 12 or 13 years to reach the highest pay rate. And I know veteran flight attendants will say, just keep flying longer and the pay will get better. That may be true, but of course, someone who has been doing the job for 20 years will make more than someone new. The problem is how new flight attendants are supposed to live for more than a decade before that higher pay finally shows up. Many airlines only guarantee around 72 to 75 flight hours a month. Some people still make $50,000 or $60,000 in their first year, but usually that is because they pick up a whole lot of extra trips. Sounds simple, right? Fly more if you want to make more. But going from around 75 to nearly 100 flight hours can mean being away from home for more than 20 days a month. What about young children? What about aging parents? And airlines do not always have extra trips available for them to pick up. And there is more. Before they even get to the airport, many flight attendants have already spent 2 or 3 hours getting ready. You heard that right. This job requires a very polished appearance. The uniform, hair, makeup, luggage, and all the paperwork have to be ready. Then they still have to travel to the airport and sometimes even fly to another state just to begin their shift. A flight from Texas to Colorado may only take around 2 hours in the air. But from the time they report for duty, prepare the cabin board passengers, complete the flight, and finish the process of clocking out, the total time can stretch to 5 or 6 hours. And that does not even include the time spent getting ready before leaving home. And this is the part I have the hardest time accepting. They are already there. They are already in uniform. They are helping passengers, handling luggage, and dealing with seating issues. But according to the flight attendants in the video's, paid time may not begin until the airplane door closes and the brakes are released. The work has already started, the responsibility has already started, but the pay has not. One flight attendant with 6 years of experience who had worked for the company for 8 years said that when she counted all the time the job took from her, she was only making the equivalent of around $15 an hour in Seattle. Meanwhile, an entry-level receptionist job might pay $23 or $24. At that point, almost all the glamour disappears. They are not just selling their labor, they are also losing hours that their paychecks seem not to see. And when income does not reflect all the time a person has put in rent is where the consequences show up most clearly. And even if every hour of work is paid, another problem still remains. How much can that money actually buy when everything around you keeps getting more expensive? The 3 people in those videos have very different situations. One owns a home and runs a business. One works in healthcare. The other makes more than 6 figures a year. But did you notice what they have in common? None of them said they were lazy or unwilling to work. What they are describing is the feeling that their income can no longer keep up with life. The first woman keeps getting one notice after another. Her property taxes went up another $600 a year. Her homeowner's insurance went up $60 a month. Filling her propane tank once cost $1,000. If she loses her tax subsidy, she says her health insurance could jump from $45 to $660 a month. Think about it. What is she supposed to cut? First, homeowner's insurance, fuel, health insurance, or food? This is no longer about canceling Netflix to save a few dollars. When the biggest increases are all basic necessities, where else are people supposed to cut back? And housing is where that pressure shows up most clearly. A lot of people think their costs will become stable once they buy a home. But the mortgage payment may stay the same while taxes, insurance, energy, and repair costs keep going up. The house is not getting any bigger. Life is not getting any better. It just costs more to keep everything exactly where it is. For renters, sometimes just one rent increase letter is enough to force them to pack up their entire lives. The second woman still works in healthcare. She did not lose her job, but when her landlord raised the rent, she said she could no longer afford it and had to move in 1 degree below zero weather. Honestly, that part really bothered me. Someone is still going to work and still taking care of other people, but she has to find a side job just to keep a roof over her head. If a healthcare worker is not even sure she can pay next month's rent, what does a stable job actually guarantee anymore? Housing is the biggest bill, but the grocery store is where people feel rising prices every week. Someone joked that a tray of beef at Walmart had nearly doubled in price, while their base pay had not moved at all. Prices may not have risen the same way at every store, but the feeling behind that statement is very real. The shopping cart keeps getting smaller, while the number on the receipt keeps getting bigger. What does a raise even mean if the landlord, the insurance company, and the grocery store have already taken it before you get a chance to feel it? And before anyone says the answer is simply to make more money. Remember the third woman, she makes 6 figures, but she still had to move back in with her parents, help with the mortgage, and keep the whole family going after a period of unemployment. She is not poor on paper, but she still feels like she is living in survival mode. Is America becoming a place where people have to earn more, work more, and sacrifice more just to stay in the same place? And when housing and food costs rise faster than the feeling of moving forward, young people do not just cut back on shopping, they start putting off their entire future. In the previous part, we saw how rising prices can eat away at income, but there is something even more misleading than number printed on a paycheck. I want to tell you about my brother when he opened his first paycheck from his residency program. His gross pay was more than $2,200. When he looked at the hourly rate, it showed nearly $40. Honestly, if that were all you heard, a lot of people would think that was not low at all. Nearly $40 an hour sounds like a pretty good job, right? But the amount that actually went into his bank account was only around $1,774. Do you see the difference here? More than $2,200 on paper. Around $1,774 he could actually use. In just one pay period, more than $450 disappeared before he ever had a chance to touch it. Of course, we have to be fair. The paycheck shown in the video does not provide a complete breakdown of every deduction. I also do not know exactly how many hours he worked during that pay period, and for a medical resident, the actual number of hours is a very important detail. So I'm not going to look at that number of nearly $40 and claim that it was his real pay for every hour he spent at the hospital, but that is exactly what makes this worth thinking about. The hourly rate is one number, gross income is another number, and the amount that actually reaches the bank account is a completely different number. So when someone says they make nearly $40 an hour, what are we really talking about? The number shown in the system, the total before deductions, or the money they can actually use after the pay period ends? This is why I am always careful when I hear people say, that person makes pretty good money. Looking good on paper does not always feel good in real life. A paycheck can look very impressive when you only look at the first line. But life does not run on the first line, it runs on the final number deposited into your account. And at this point, if you are wondering how many hours someone has to work to escape poverty in America, the next number may make you take another look at the American dream. First, I want you to answer a simple question. In today's economy, who can live on less than $15 an hour? I am not asking who wants to take that job. A lot of people do not have a choice. They still have to pay rent, buy food, and put gas in the car to get to work. But is a job that pays $4 or $5 above minimum wage really good paying when the starting point is already so far below the actual cost of living? The federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, even though many states have set higher rates. Honestly, I do not understand how someone working full-time is supposed to build a life on that amount. I am not saying everyone needs to make 6 figures, that is not realistic. But someone who spends the entire week working should at least be able to keep a roof over their head, eat, get around, and see a doctor when necessary. Is that really too much to ask? When income is not enough, the math still has to work somehow. Workers may leave one bill unpaid, depend on their parents or partner, or work more than 40 hours a week. On paper, they are still surviving. But they are surviving through debt help from other people or by selling almost all of their time. And this is where the person in the video made a comparison that made me listen again. Japan at around 11 hours, the United Kingdom at 23 hours, France at 26 hours, Canada at 44 hours, and the United States at around 90 hours of work a week to rise above the poverty line. 90 hours, that is nearly 13 hours a day if you work all 7 days. But we need to be careful. The video does not fully explain the calculation, the type of household, or which benefits were included. The OECD measure itself also changes based on household structure, wages, social benefits, and each country's relative poverty standard, so I cannot say that this comparison is completely equal. But why does the number 90 hours not sound all that unfamiliar to so many Americans? Is it because working 2 jobs has become normal? Is it because 40 hours is no longer enough to feel secure? Even escaping poverty does not necessarily mean living comfortably. The official poverty line is a statistical boundary based on household size and composition. Crossing that line does not suddenly make rent, insurance, and food easy to afford. The person in the video also said that some people in the Bay Area need to make $50 to $60 an hour to rent a home without constantly worrying. That number depends on the situation, but California considers households that spend more than about 30% of their income on housing to be cost burdened. And what are people between 35 and 45 doing? They are giving up travel, coffee shopping, entertainment, and eventually even their children's activities. You can tell them to cut out coffee, but once the coffee is gone, the vacation has been canceled and nearly every source of enjoyment has disappeared. What else are they supposed to cut? The American dream once promised that hard work would help people move forward in life. But if someone has to work 2 or 3 jobs just to keep from falling behind, is that dream getting closer, or is it quietly moving farther away from the very people who are still trying to chase it? After all the stories we just heard, it is easy to point fingers at Washington corporations or a political party, but honestly, I do not think one person, one law, or one election can fix this entire problem. Wages, housing, insurance, healthcare, and childcare did not all become more expensive for the same reason. So the solution probably cannot fit into one slogan either. In my opinion, the question should begin with something very basic. What is the American dream really supposed to be? Maybe it does not mean everyone has to be rich. It also cannot guarantee that everyone will get the same result. But should someone who works full-time be able to keep a roof over their head, buy food, take care of their family, and save something for the future? If work no longer creates a path upward, what should we take another look at? First, America may need to reconsider the value of 1 hour of labor. That does not necessarily mean setting the same number everywhere, because the cost of living in a small town is not the same as it is in Seattle or San Francisco. But should a minimum wage stay frozen for so long while the cost of basic necessities keeps changing? And if raising wages too quickly could hurt small businesses, that deserves consideration too. Maybe the question is not simply whether wages should rise, but how quickly they should rise and how businesses can be helped to adjust. Working time also needs to be shown more clearly. When someone has already been required to report, prepare, wait, and take responsibility, should all of that time be shown more transparently on the paycheck? Housing may be the biggest challenge. Helping with rent without building more homes may not be enough. But simply building more homes while ignoring people who are about to lose their housing may not solve the problem either. Does America need to increase the housing supply while also protecting more vulnerable families? The same goes for healthcare, insurance, and childcare. We cannot simply tell people to work more when the cost of being able to work takes almost all of their additional income. Of course, every solution comes with a cost. That is why people have the right to demand transparency where the money goes, which programs work, and who actually benefits. I do not think the people we just watched are asking for a free life. They only want their work to provide some real stability. Maybe the American dream has not disappeared. But for it to still mean something ordinary, people need to keep seeing a path toward it. And maybe the place to start is not with a new promise, but with making work capable of moving people forward again. We often assume that managers make good money, flight attendants earn a solid income, skilled workers have stability, and people with college degrees have an easier life. But based on the stories we just heard, the reality seems much more complicated. A lot of people still work full-time, still have experience, and still try their best every day, but they can barely move forward. They have no money for a vacation, no emergency fund, they cannot afford to buy assets or make long-term plans. Many people have to take on extra work, and the gig economy is growing not necessarily because everyone wants to be their own boss, but because one income is no longer enough. Financial hardship does not always come from irresponsible spending. It can happen when wages rise more slowly than prices, when full-time work no longer guarantees a basic standard of living, and when workers have to do more, but still stay in the same place. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which paycheck surprised you the most, and how are you dealing with the cost of living? Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.